my goals for the story arcs of season 2? Well, I think part of it was just finishing out a lot of the ideas that we had from season 1.
We didn't anticipate ending the season with that episode last year. So when we came back, we were sort of put through a drill by the network. They wanted to know what we had in mind for season 2.
In season 2, we really wanted to expand the scope of the show. And when we say expand the scope, that means being on location a lot more.
Some of the things that I was interested in at the end of season 1, we've been exploring a lot in season 2. Specifically, what's the residue from Cameron's damage to her chip? How has that affected her ability to do her job? How has it affected her relationship with John?
Are you busy?
No.
So we kind of came into this room for a few weeks and started talking about, where we had left off and where we might want to go. And everything kind of focused on the John Connor character. And we decided that this should be the year of his emancipation from his mother.
Now is not the time for this.
Now is not the time. Well, when is the time?
It was really about the family dynamic and trying to see whether or not I could pull the family apart and put them back together again.
You're pissed off because I found someone I actually like spending time with, and it's not you.
Everyone already knows she's building Skynet. Everyone already knows the Turk is Skynet. So we're all waiting for it to wake up and be evil.
The writer's room is a very, almost sacred place on our show. And it is where, outside of Josh's head, where, every creative idea is vetted.
It's challenging, and this is the first show that I've ever run, so I took a lot of my cues from John, actually, who's been doing this for many years, but at the same time, it was creatively, I was sort of, as George Bush said, I was the decider.
It's about what do we want to do with the Ellison character, where do we want to take that character, and how do we want to use that character to reveal the place where we want to get, like at the end of this season, right?
But she's still sort of means testing him where we are in 11, which is that he has to go through the Savannah hoop in order to get to the end of 11, which is sort of a false beat because he's done so many other things that would sort of justify his involvement, specifically bringing the body. You want there to be a good, healthy debate about things, and you want to hear every good idea. You don't want anybody, from a co-EP to a staff writer, you don't want anybody to feel like they can't express a great idea, because they're all writers. They're all, they're very good writers. That's why we hired them. So they're all eminently qualified to have a great idea. And I think, so you want to foster that. You don't want anyone to feel hesitant, like you're going to shut them down or make fun of them or again, just not hear them.
At least my read of it is that Cameron was on the road to some sort of, to becoming more than what she was. I don't think that means the data she's going to become human. It means that she's, that she's growing beyond her original programming in an interesting way.
If her overall programming includes trying to become as human-like as possible in order to have John love her, then anything that she could do to practice or investigate humanity and becoming more human,
More human-like.
or more human-like, is within that prime directive. So I think that trying to just, have good chemistry in the room and some continuity with your staff over time is probably the best way to get the best ideas. And then I just have to be smart enough to either to see a good idea, or get out of the way.
Ellison's job is to this happened.
The process at Sarah Connor is extremely collaborative. We break stories collectively as a team, and then each writer takes one episode and writes it from start to finish.
It's very organic because sometimes you go in there having no idea where you were even supposed to go until somebody throws something out that everybody jumps on.
Sometimes people come in with an individual episode idea or just like a thread of a storyline, and we build on it, and it's just very, very collaborative.
Listen, I have a big problem. It's gonna sound very strange, but I've been transformed into an eel. I'm in the office of Catherine Weaver. You gotta come help me because I'm the only eel in the office.
8 heads are better than 1. So everybody contributes to the story. We break it down in detail, and we write it up on the board. I mean, even, like Act 1, Number 1, exterior, Connor house, day. And then we have a little block of prose that we write up there, and that usually contains what is the action of the scene, who's in the scene, what are the characters' attitudes in the scene, and how does it get us to the next scene, some sense of what happens next. Josh loves the notion of driving a story forward by asking yourself the question, what happens next? And then what happens? And then what happens?
Where are we going now?
We're not going anywhere. I'm going somewhere. And I'm gonna go alone.
You shouldn't be alone.
Yes, I should.
Once we have a broad idea, we just start trying to come up with story beats, and we all sit around and throw out story ideas and what if this and what if this happened, and we make lists and we fill up boards and we draw diagrams and get in arguments.
It seems like we're wagging our dog to try to get rid of this character Sherman, and we should be thinking about how it advances our story with the Turk. I mean, because the Turk is going to stay around. So,
well, that's what I thought. Like, if the Turk is old, but I think if we're centering it on, hey, let's just kill Sherman because he's really inconvenient in terms of following him.
The essence of the pitch is. I mean, philosophically, I'm not against killing off Sherman at some point. I just think episode 11 is. I think episode 11 is too early to do it. I think it overloads. I think it overloads the episode, and I think it's way too early to put blood on the Turk's hands, even accidentally.
At this point, I think it's just wrong, and I don't think.
What if
Shirley did it?
Yeah. Could be, but my question is why.
Oftentimes conflict equals drama, and we have our share of that, although we try and, we do our best to keep it respectful, and if we're on the attack, we are going after each other's ideas and not after each other as people.
It's relatively egalitarian, everybody has a say, and that all starts with Josh.
Josh is very interested in his characters and what they're going to do and making them very, very unique.
So once we kind of have the story, we talk about it kind of in general terms for a couple of days, and usually the writer will go to one of the whiteboards and write down any idea that kind of sticks.
And then we send some unfortunate soul or fortunate soul off to write the first draft of that script.
The writer goes off, writes the script. I do a set of notes on the script, which I give to Josh, and then he does the final pass on the script. Every single script we do here runs through his computer.
We have usually at that point a really strong structure. I rarely have to restructure things, but sometimes we were getting scripts pretty much probably 36 hours before we had to start prepping them. I would take that script and hole up in my room for 2 nights and rewrite it, kind of, making it all into the voice that I like.
John is John's problem. Humans are the problem. There's only one way for him to be safe. That's to be alone.
This season, one of the things we set out to do was to create some standalone episodes so that new viewers could watch our show and feel that they'd seen a complete episode.
I know him.
Unless you're about, 110 years old. That photo's from 1920. See, December 31st, 1920.
As the season progressed, we realized that, there is a literary quality to the show. There's a novelistic quality to the show. In the television world, they call it being serialized. I look at it as literary because I feel that Josh has poetry to his vision and to his writing.
There's a bit of a life cycle to the whole process, and I think on a lot of shows that have a lot more standalone aspects, it's easier because you may have a writer come in and say, I want to do, this, or I read this article about, this, and maybe we should do an episode about this. And our show doesn't really work that way because it's so serialized. And I think even in the second season, where some people had a sense that it was more standalone, at least for the first part of the season, it really had to carry all these serialized elements, and you could never ignore the mythology. So it's very difficult for us to sort of send people off on independent study and come back with 5 story ideas. It just doesn't work that way.
So when it comes to deciding what we're going to do, he's the final arbiter. It's all about what he wants to do. He sets the table for us. He tells us where we're going. We have a lot of talented people on this writing staff, and everybody contributes, and everybody, you know, over time, it kind of sifts down. Everybody, it's like a family, dysfunctional family of brothers and sisters.
There needs to be, and is on the show, a central vision and aesthetic. You know, it's not just about what are our mythology beats. It's how we tell the story, how we use language, how we use voiceover. Those kind of things need a very specific aesthetic, and Josh has that.
For all of us, it's really been we have mutual respect for each other, and we've sort of found a niche. You know, I mean, James spends almost all of his time on the set, or you know, and has really done a great job of kind of taking what he knows from me and the things that are important to me in a performance, and found ways to communicate them to the directors and to the actors.
So if you watch our episodes and you can go from 1 to 22, I think you'll have a real sense of this all has a feel to it. It feels of a whole. It feels like, you know, one thing rather than 8 separate people's ideas of what the Sarah Connor universe is like. And that's the power of having a very strong creator with a vision.
Any television show, by and large, it's falling in love with those characters and watching them struggle and change through time. And that's the same for this show. I mean, this show just happens to have an action component to it and a scary robot component to it. But at the end of the day, it's a show about these family members trying to struggle against mortality.